Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with everything, only to be told you were overreacting when you finally spoke up? You gave them loyalty, they gave you a dagger. And yet, after the betrayal, it's you who's expected to explain yourself, to talk it out, to be the bigger person. But what if being the bigger person doesn't mean saying more, but saying nothing at all? Part 1: The Betrayer's Trap: Why Silence is the Strongest Exit. You might feel the fire rising in your chest, that impulse to call them out, to set the record straight. But when betrayal occurs, words are almost never received with reason. Why? Because the betrayer has already rewritten the story in their head, and in that version, you are the villain. Seneca once wrote, "He who has injured thee was either stronger or weaker than thee. If weaker, spare him; if stronger, spare thyself." You are not obligated to plead your pain to those who minimized it in the first place. You don't owe them an emotional encore. When someone violates your trust, your greatest power is not in confrontation, it's in disengagement. You don't walk away to escape. You walk away to preserve your dignity, your energy, and your clarity. Just ask Michelle Obama. When she was publicly attacked, personally, politically, and racially, during her time as First Lady, she didn't fire back with outrage. She didn't lower herself to the level of those who tried to dehumanize her. Instead, she embodied stillness, famously saying, "When they go low, we go high." That silence is strength. It's restraint backed by immense discipline. The kind of discipline Stoicism teaches. Now ask yourself, what's the cost of explaining yourself to someone who doesn't even feel guilty? All you're doing is feeding their ego, giving them more chances to deny, deflect, and devalue your experience. You deserve better than that. Let me give you a story. You once knew someone who you thought was solid, maybe a close friend, maybe even family. They started speaking about you behind your back. They revealed things you told them in confidence, and when you confronted them, they gaslighted you. "You're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that." The more you tried to get them to see your pain, the more you felt invisible. That wasn't a conversation, it was an emotional trap. This is what the Stoics understood better than anyone. People's actions are often beyond your control, but your response, that's where your freedom lives. Epictetus taught, it's not things that upset us, but our judgment about things. Your silence after betrayal isn't avoidance, it's judgment. It's saying, this person doesn't deserve my voice, my time, or my energy anymore. From a modern psychological perspective, this aligns with what trauma researchers like Bessel van der Kolk suggest. When your boundaries are repeatedly crossed, re-explaining yourself re-traumatizes you. Silence, on the other hand, helps you reclaim control. So what does this look like in your life? It means when someone betrays you, you stop trying to get them to understand. It means you recognize that closure doesn't come from them, it comes from within you. It means you walk away, not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to stop bleeding energy into someone who only drains you. You are not here to rescue people from the consequences of their choices. Let karma do what words never could. Because your silence is not emptiness, it's authority. And sometimes, the best chapter in your story begins the moment you stop explaining and start detaching. Let them sit with their own echoes, let karma carry the weight. Part 2: The Lie They Tell and the Truth Time Always Reveals. Have you ever had someone lie about you, twist your words, rewrite your story, and then watch others nod along like it must be true? There's a pain in that. Not just from the betrayal, but from the silence of those who don't speak up for you. You feel invisible, erased, and naturally your instinct is to defend yourself, to say, that's not what happened, that's not who I am. But here's the truth most people never want to hear. The more you chase the lie, the more you empower it. Marcus Aurelius offered a piercing insight into this dilemma. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. In other words, stop chasing the narrative others spin about you. Start living the truth only your actions can tell. The person who lies about you isn't seeking truth, they're seeking control. They want to throw you off balance. And every time you try to explain, you fuel the drama, not the resolution. Silence then becomes your weapon, your shield. It doesn't mean you agree. It means you won't participate. You may have heard of Keanu Reeves, one of the most beloved and respected actors in modern Hollywood. What you may not know is that at various points in his life, he's been misunderstood, mocked, even called emotionless or weird by the press. But how did he respond? He didn't. Reeves chose silence, then continued to show compassion through his actions. Quiet donations to children's hospitals, humble gestures to strangers on the street, kindness behind the scenes. He never argued with the media. He simply let his integrity speak for itself, and over time it did. He went from being mocked to being revered. This is the power of what I call deliberate detachment, a Stoic mindset that lets the truth emerge naturally through observation and time, rather than reaction and defense. So the next time someone lies about you, pause, don't rush to clarify, ask yourself, who am I trying to convince? If it's someone who already doubts you, no explanation will be enough. If it's someone who knows your character, no explanation is needed. Here's a simple truth from modern cognitive psychology. Our brains remember emotionally charged conflict better than facts. That means when you jump in to explain yourself passionately, what people remember isn't what you said, it's how upset you looked when you said it. And suddenly, you look guilty just for being emotional. That's how a lie mutates. But silence leaves no trail to twist. Let me tell you about a client I once coached. We'll call him Leo. He worked in finance, steady, ethical, always willing to help. Until a colleague began spreading subtle, strategic rumors about him, accusing him of insider favoritism and mishandling of sensitive data. None of it was true, but whispers are dangerous. They infect perception before proof can even enter the room. Leo came to me wanting to blast an email to set the record straight. I told him to wait, to stay still, to observe instead of react, and so he did. He kept doing his job with grace, with discipline, while the accuser doubled down, more lies, more drama. Within a month, that colleague got caught in a separate scandal, his credibility tanked, and Leo, he didn't just survive. He gained quiet admiration from his team for staying grounded when it would have been easier to rage. This is the paradox. Silence accelerates karma faster than confrontation. It removes your fingerprints from the fire and lets the fire burn out on its own. So what should you do when someone lies about you? 1. Stay grounded, don't explain, be consistent in your integrity. 2. Let your actions speak. Live in a way that contradicts the lie. 3. Trust the long game. A false narrative may run fast, but it always runs out of breath. Because in the end, people may believe the lie for a moment, but they'll trust the truth for a lifetime if you don't fall into the trap of performance. Let your silence become the proof of who you are. Let karma trace the path back to them. Part 3. Provocation is a mirror. Your stillness breaks it. Some people don't want to understand you, they just want to unravel you. They poke, prod, and provoke you not for clarity, but for chaos. Their goal isn't truth. It's reaction. They want you rattled, and the moment you respond, whether in anger, sarcasm, or explanation, they win. But here's the Stoic counter. What happens when you offer them nothing? Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. You are not required to attend every emotional ambush you're invited to. In fact, the less you show up, the more power you gain. You know this type of person. They bait you with passive aggression, with smirks, with loaded phrases like, I guess you're just sensitive, or calm down, I was joking. But it's not a joke and you know it. Still, responding gives them the attention they crave and the chaos they feed on. It turns you from calm observer to active participant in a drama you never auditioned for. But imagine this, you say nothing, you look them in the eye. You smile slightly and you don't take the bait. Now they're the ones left with the emotional bag they packed for you. It's theirs to carry. and yours to walk away from. Let's talk about a real-world example. Barack Obama, regardless of where you stand politically, was a master of composed silence. Throughout his presidency, he faced relentless provocation. Whether through media attacks, racial slurs, or partisan jabs, the aim was the same: to make him slip, to trigger a reaction that could be used against him. And yet, time and again, he chose the long breath, the measured pause, the composed gaze. He knew the value of not giving people the drama they were desperate for. Instead of letting them write his emotional narrative, he wrote his own. That's not weakness, that's discipline, that's Stoic silence in modern form. Now you might ask, but if I stay silent, don't I seem weak? Let's be clear. There's a difference between silent submission and strategic silence. You're not staying quiet because you're scared. You're staying quiet because you're free. You know who you are, you know what matters. You're not here to win ego battles, you're here to live in alignment with your principles. A client of mine, let's call her Dana, once shared this moment at work. A colleague publicly challenged her expertise during a project review. Passive-aggressive comments, undermining suggestions, all said with a smile. She told me I wanted to slap back with receipts, but I just breathed, smiled, and thanked him for his input. I asked what happened next. He kept trying to poke. But I kept showing results. He got louder. I stayed still. Eventually, others saw through him. I never had to say a word. That's not detachment, it's mastery. You don't need to raise your voice when your presence speaks volumes. And from a psychological perspective, this works for a simple reason. People who provoke are often operating from emotional immaturity. Their power comes from hooking your nervous system. If they can get you out of your calm state, they control the tempo of the interaction. But when you remain still, they become visible. Their games become obvious, and the crowd they were trying to impress now sees through the act. So what should you do the next time someone tries to provoke you? One, recognize the pattern. Not all conflict is genuine. Some is engineered. 2, return to your breath. Your body is your ally. Calmness is felt before it's seen. 3, respond with presence, not reaction. A nod, a pause, a calm thank you, that's all you need, because your power isn't in the noise, it's in your refusal to dance with chaos. Let the provocateur exhaust themselves. Let karma deal with the reflection they can't escape. You walk away untouched. Part 4, when they play the victim, let silence expose the script. You've seen it before. Someone wrongs you, maybe they lie, manipulate, or betray, and then when confronted, they twist the story. Suddenly, they're the one who's been hurt. They're the misunderstood one, you're the aggressor now, and they're the fragile, wounded soul. This is the game of emotional inversion, a psychological sleight of hand. And if you've ever tried to defend yourself against someone who plays the victim, you know exactly how exhausting it is. You explain, they spin, you clarify, they cry. The more you speak, the guiltier you look. This is where your silence becomes surgical. Seneca warned, he who excuses himself accuses himself. Because once you step into their narrative, you're no longer a participant, you've become a character in their performance. And in their story, they always need a villain. You don't need to be it. Let me take you into the public life of someone who's faced this dynamic on the grandest scale, Taylor Swift. Early in her career, she was labeled as too emotional, playing the victim, manipulative, especially by the media and high-profile figures. Every time she defended herself, the narrative warped. She was feuding, attention-seeking, or crying wolf. For years, her words were ammunition for those eager to discredit her, and then something shifted. She stopped explaining. She channeled her silence into art, into presence, into detachment. She reclaimed her story, not by shouting over her critics, but by outgrowing them. And today, her reputation is no longer shaped by reaction. It's shaped by consistency, strength, and truth. You don't have to be famous to learn from this. You may have someone in your life, personal or professional, who always escapes accountability by turning the spotlight of guilt onto you. The moment you confront them, the tears come. The defensiveness, the dramatic exit, the carefully curated sob story to others about how you were so unfair. The Stoics would call this a misuse of logos, the rational mind corrupted by self-interest, and trying to untangle it. It's like arguing with a fog. You won't find clarity, only frustration. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And in this case, that means not engaging in emotional manipulation by trying to control the narrative. Instead, you let time do what your words can't. There's a reason modern psychologists say, don't feed the drama, because emotional manipulators thrive on your response. Their oxygen is your attention. Take that away and the illusion begins to starve. One of my clients, let's call her Annika, once worked with a manager who was notoriously toxic. Whenever Annika brought up legitimate concerns, the manager would cry in meetings, deflect, and then spread the story that Annika was bullying her. Annika was devastated. She wanted to clear her name, but after weeks of mental exhaustion, she chose something else: complete emotional withdrawal. No reaction, no defense, only professionalism and composure. And slowly the truth revealed itself. Over time, that manager repeated the same victim script with others. Patterns formed. The drama stopped working. Leadership saw through the act, and Annika. She rose not because she fought, but because she endured with clarity. So what do you do when someone plays the victim after hurting you? 1. Refuse to play the role they've assigned you. You're not their villain. You don't need to fight for innocence. 2. Stay still. Truth isn't revealed through arguments, it's revealed through time and behavior. 3. Let their pattern betray them. Anyone who repeatedly plays the victim reveals their true character eventually. Because when you go silent in the face of manipulation, you're not giving up the fight, you're choosing a different battlefield. One where time, not words, wins. Let their script collapse under the weight of its own contradiction. Let karma unmask the actor. You stay in your integrity, quiet, rooted, and unshakable. Part 5. The echo of absence. When they ignore your worth, there's a special kind of ache that comes not from being attacked, but from being overlooked. You give, you support, you show up, and yet they act as if your presence is disposable. As if your efforts are invisible. They don't say it aloud, but their silence speaks volumes. You're not important enough to acknowledge. At first, you might feel the urge to prove yourself, to explain your value, to show them why you matter. But here's what the Stoics knew, and what modern psychology confirms: begging to be valued always leads to deeper self-abandonment. Epictetus warned, "Never depend on the admiration of others. There is no strength in it." Personal merit cannot be derived from external recognition. In other words, when you tie your worth to someone else's validation, you hand them the keys to your peace. And once they know you're desperate to be seen, they stop looking. Because availability without boundaries breeds contempt. Instead of pleading, try this, go silent, not with resentment, not as punishment, but with resolve. Let the echo of your absence remind them of the presence they took for granted. You may recognize this cycle in your own life, maybe in a romantic relationship or a long-time friendship or even at work. You always initiate, you remember birthdays, you ask how they're doing, you invest, but when the roles reverse. Silence. There's a famous example in the life of Chadwick Boseman, the late actor best known for playing Black Panther. Throughout his career, he quietly endured being typecast, underestimated, and even questioned for his intense dedication. He never lashed out, he didn't campaign for appreciation. Instead, he poured himself into his craft, silently, purposefully, with unwavering focus. And in his final years, still silent about his cancer diagnosis, he gave the world performances that have since become legendary. When he passed, the recognition poured in, but he never lived for applause, he lived for purpose. That's the Stoic path, and it's the path available to you every time you feel unseen. Let me share the story of one listener I worked with. His name was Jorge. He was the glue of his friend group, the dependable one. always organizing events, always checking in, until one day he decided to stop reaching out. No anger, no drama, just a quiet experiment. Weeks passed, then months. Not one person asked where he'd gone, not one checked in. At first, Jorge felt crushed, but then came the clarity. Those connections were conditional. They required his constant effort to survive, and if he had to chase people to matter, he'd never truly belong. So he did what the Stoics would advise. He built new friendships, grounded in mutual effort and shared values. And he never looked back. Here's the paradox. Your value becomes clear not when you shout it, but when you withdraw it. Modern psychology calls this the law of scarcity. People often fail to recognize value when it's constantly accessible. But once it's removed, they begin to feel its weight. So what do you do when someone consistently ignores your worth? 1. Stop performing. Let go of the need to earn basic recognition. 2. Step back quietly. No announcements. No bitterness, just absence. 3. Watch who notices and who doesn't. That's your answer. Because when you stop proving your worth, you begin protecting it. And the silence that once scared you, it becomes sacred. Let karma illuminate what words never could. Let your absence teach the lesson your presence never could. And above all, let yourself be free of people who only notice your value once it's gone. Part 6. The fire of betrayal and the strength of your silence. There's something about betrayal that cuts deeper than almost any other wound. It's not just about what was done, it's about who did it. You let them in. You trusted them with parts of you that weren't meant for the world, and they took that trust and broke it like it meant nothing. The temptation to respond, to confront, to scream, to demand they see the hurt they've caused is overwhelming. But Stoicism offers another path, one that doesn't erase the pain but transforms it into power. Seneca, who wrote deeply about human suffering, said, "It is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness. Betrayal is a rough road. But if you walk it with integrity and silence, it becomes the forge for your evolution. Because here's the truth, confronting a betrayer rarely gives you peace. Why? Because they've already justified what they did. They've rewritten the story in their head, made excuses, blamed you. And the moment you try to explain how deeply they hurt you, they twist it again. You're overreacting, you misunderstood, you were never enough anyway. That's not a conversation. That's an extraction. You pour out your heart hoping for accountability, but all they offer is deflection. So you stop explaining, you stop needing them to understand, and instead you choose a higher response. You walk away in silence. One of the most powerful public examples of this is Jennifer Aniston. When her marriage to Brad Pitt ended under the blinding spotlight of media speculation and betrayal, she didn't fight back with accusations. She didn't speak ill even when others tried to provoke her. She maintained grace, boundaries, and a kind of stillness that spoke louder than any headline. And with time, her dignity reshaped the narrative. She wasn't a victim. She became a symbol of self-worth, elegance, and personal growth. She let karma write the chapter she refused to narrate with bitterness. That's what silence can do. Not the silence of repression, but the silence of self-respect. I remember a man named Elijah I once spoke to. He was engaged to a woman he'd been with for 5 years. One day, without warning, she ended the relationship, and within a month was with someone else, someone he knew. The betrayal shattered him. He wanted answers, closure, a final conversation, but she refused. And instead of begging, instead of chasing the why, he did something remarkable. He went silent, he blocked her, deleted the photos. Refused to let his energy leak towards someone who had already shown him their value system. And in that silence, something changed. His focus returned. His self-worth rebuilt. And he began a journey of healing that wasn't built on revenge, but renewal. Silence after betrayal is not passive, it is an active form of healing. Psychologically, when you cut off the feedback loop with the betrayer, you reclaim control of your nervous system. Your mind stops anticipating their next word. Your heart begins to close the door they left open, and your future becomes yours again, not tied to their shadow. So what do you do when someone betrays your trust? 1. Don't demand closure. Their lack of accountability is the closure. 2. Don't explain your pain to them. They already know and chose to ignore it. 3. Walk away with silence and dignity. Let your absence speak for your value, and remember, you are not what they did, you are what you choose to become next. Let karma follow their path. You stay still, strong, and sovereign, because in the aftermath of betrayal, your silence becomes the loudest testament to your worth. Part 7. Letting go, the final victory of silence. What remains when the storm passes, when the arguments have faded, when the texts go unanswered, when the manipulation collapses under its own weight, is you. Not the version of you others tried to control, not the version that was gaslighted into silence or provoked into rage, but the real you, calm, rooted, resilient. You see, when you walk away in silence, you're not retreating. You're advancing toward peace. That silence becomes your sword, cutting away anything that drains your energy, insults your worth, or undermines your clarity. It slices through the noise, the lies, the narratives others try to impose. It sends a message louder than any confrontation. I refuse to give you control over my mind, my time, or my spirit. But it's also your shield, protecting your dignity, keeping you from stooping to levels that betray your values, guarding you from the chaos of people who thrive on emotional games and crisis creation. While others shout, slander, or sulk, your silence keeps you covered. It becomes your sanctuary. And when you embrace that, you'll begin to see that silence is not the absence of power, it is the essence of it. It's what Marcus Aurelius understood as the highest form of self-control. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, this isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a roadmap for your everyday life. When your coworker disrespects you in a meeting and you respond with poised silence, you remind them you cannot be emotionally manipulated. When someone ghosted you and you resist the urge to beg for an explanation, your silence says, I am not desperate for breadcrumbs of attention. When a friend betrays you and you choose to exit without rage or revenge, your silence declares, I have outgrown the need to be understood by those who refuse to understand. This is not coldness, this is not indifference. This is what psychologists call emotional detachment with intention, a skill practiced by the mentally strong and the spiritually disciplined. And while others might gossip, gaslight, or goad you, karma quietly goes to work. No, karma doesn't wear a cape or strike like thunder. It's not dramatic or theatrical. It's subtle, it's slow, but it's always in motion. The energy people put into the world always finds its way back, and those who hurt you will come to terms with the silence you left behind. Your silence may not change them, it may not right the wrongs, but it will preserve you. And that is always the greater victory. So ask yourself, who do you need to stop explaining yourself to? What drama do you need to walk away from wordlessly? Where in your life have you been talking when you should be choosing stillness? These are not just reflections, these are invitations to elevate, because this channel, Unshakable Calm, is about more than just enduring. It's about evolving. It's about learning that power is not found in louder voices, it's found in a quieter mind. It's about transforming ancient Stoic wisdom into a living, breathing, modern strength. So today, let this be your affirmation. I am no longer available for what disturbs my peace. I do not explain, I do not chase. I do not react, I remain calm, I remain clear, I remain unshakable. Now, if this message spoke to you, if it stirred something within you or gave you a sense of clarity, leave a comment below. Tell me, where in your life has silence been your greatest strength? Or if you're just beginning this journey, tell me, where do you most need to let go and let karma do the work? Your story might be exactly what someone else here needs to hear. This is a community, this is a place of growth, and if you haven't already, subscribe. because here, every week, we explore how ancient Stoic truths can help us navigate modern life with integrity, clarity, and inner peace. Your silence, when chosen with wisdom, becomes a revolution. It is the sound of you reclaiming your power. So stay silent, stay centered, and stay with us on the path of the unshakable calm.